And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello everyone, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist John Cowan. Thanks for joining us today for your aviation forecast. We'll start out looking at flying weather across the state for Friday morning. You can see we have a very large area of IFR over the far western bearing. That's thanks to the next storm that's going to be entering the picture over the next few days, causing bad weather across that portion of the state. Up over the north slope, we still have some lingering areas of IFR associated with some fronts that are moving in from the northwest, continuing to pull that cold air and cloudy and snowy weather along with it. Over the central interior, we do have some areas of IFR set for Friday morning, but most of the region should be VFR. And then as we work our way into the Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle, still some marginal flying conditions across most of this area. However, we do have some VFR mainly over the southern portion of the Panhandle. Getting into Friday afternoon, still some areas of IFR showing up here in the Chugach and Prince William Sound region, although marginal conditions are prevailing across this area. Across the interior, we do have plenty of VFR weather, so beautiful flying for Friday afternoon. Still some marginal conditions across most of the North Slope and West Coast, as we still have some cloudy conditions and snow showers lingering across that area. And as you can see out over the Bering, our next storm system continues to progress east as it makes its way into the Bering. Getting into Saturday morning, our large area of IFR associated with the leading front here has moved over most of the central and eastern Aleutians, starting to get towards the Alaska Peninsula. Up over the North Slope, we do have marginal conditions, although we do have some IFR starting to show up now in the western Brooks Range. And then over the eastern interior, over 40-mile country, some higher terrain out here over the eastern interior, still looking at some IFR for Friday morning. However, most areas are going to be VFR. And then over towards the Panhandle, we do have some marginal conditions that have worked their way into the lower portion of the Panhandle. However, the northern half and most of the Gulf Coast remaining VFR for Saturday morning. And then finally Saturday afternoon, some IFR continuing to show up over the eastern Alaska range, some of the higher terrain of the eastern interior, otherwise looking VFR across the interior. However, portions of the Panhandle now looking mostly marginal, with some IFR even popping up in the northern portions of the Panhandle there. Coming back over the Bering Sea, you can see our IFR has mainly moved south. Still plenty of IFR along the central and eastern Aleutians, though, as the system begins to exit the picture. Let's go ahead and take a look at our passes. For Friday, Anaktuvik Pass looking VFR. However, we do have some marginal conditions that are going to be remaining on the northern end of the pass here across the North Slope. Same story is expected for Adigan Pass. VFR for the pass itself, however, marginal up north. Taking a look at Lake Clark and Merrill passes, looking absolutely beautiful for Friday. VFR weather all day expected there. Same story for Rainy Pass, VFR weather. VFR for Windy. VFR for Isabel. Mentasta Pass is going to start out the day in VFR territory. However, we do have some weather that's going to be working its way into the region in the afternoon time, so transitioning to MVFR there. Tanita Pass looking VFR all day. However, you will notice on the eastern portion of the pass, we do have some marginal conditions going to be lingering in this area. Portage Pass looking to be marginal all day, as we do have some weather that's going to be moving into the Gulf Coast region and Gulf of Alaska. And you will notice even some potential for IFR on the eastern entrance of the pass. And then finally over to Chilkoot and White Pass, starting out the day in MVFR territory, improving as we go throughout the day into VFR by the afternoon time frame. Let's go ahead and take a look at our freezing levels. As you can see, across most of the state, freezing levels down to the surface, temperatures well below freezing across most of mainland Alaska, coming up to around 2,000 feet or so by the time we get to the central Aleutians. The southern Panhandle also around 2,000 feet, and then increasing rapidly as we get over towards the western Aleutians, up to about 10 to 12,000 feet over that region. Now, as you might expect, our icing conditions are going to be quite variable across this area. Up above 4,000 feet is what we're looking at for icing along the leading edge of the front as it moves its way east across the Bering Sea. However, down over the western Aleutians, up to about 12,000 feet and higher for those occasional moderate icing conditions. Over towards the Gulf of Alaska and the Gulf Coast, up above 4,000 feet is what we're looking at for most of this region for the icing potential. And then along the north slope up above, or surface up to about 6,000 feet is what we're looking at for moderate icing here. Let's go ahead and take a look at our jet stream. As you can see, we have a core of very strong winds over the Bering Sea and coming into the eastern Aleutians here, 115, even 140 knots is our maximum out there. So very strong winds up aloft. We do have a core of 70 knot winds coming down across the west coast of Alaska, and then looking east, we do have some relatively stronger winds coming out of the south to southwest at around 70 knots, even 100 knots here out over the open Gulf. Coming down to 9,000 feet, these winds come down pretty drastically. 35 knots is what we're looking at over the southern panhandle, and then over towards the Bering Sea in the far western Aleutians. Still have that stronger core of about 60 to 65 knots. And then coming down to 3,000 feet, we have that core of 55 to about 60 knots is what we're looking at over the western Aleutians. So still some pretty strong winds, low-level winds in this area. Up over the North Slope, again, we do have some stronger winds over the Barter Island area, about 40 knots or so at 3,000 feet. And then over the Gulf of Alaska, a core of stronger winds well offshore, 65 knots. However, over the southern panhandle, we're still hanging on to about 45 knot winds in this area. Now let's go ahead and look at turbulence. So as you might expect with those stronger winds over the western Aleutians, we do expect some occasional moderate turbulence up to about 3,000 feet, increasing to about 4,000 feet as we get towards the Gulf Coast, and up to above 6,000 feet is what we will be expecting for occasional moderate turbulence over the panhandle. And that'll wrap up our aviation forecast. I'm meteorologist John Cowan. Thanks for joining us.